Welcome to another episode of the Plutus Awards Podcast. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this show, we share these stories of challenges and successes, from bloggers to podcasters to writers, speakers, and more. Today's guest is Bethany McCamish, a brand expert and the founder of Bethany Works, a design studio providing psychology-backed visual solutions to purpose-driven businesses. We talk about how she began her entrepreneurial journey by starting a freelance side hustle while teaching full-time, and then how she transitioned from freelance writing to owning her design business. She also gets into the nitty-gritty about how messy a business actually is and some of the fears and challenges she's faced when pivoting to the current iteration of her online business. Let's dive right into my conversation with Bethany. Why did you choose freelance writing as your side hustle and as you were transitioning to that being a full-time gig?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I chose freelance writing, but more that freelance writing chose me in that it walked into my lap. At the very beginning, I was teaching and I thought that that would be my full-time career. I thought that was the direction I would go. And while I was teaching, I started a personal finance blog called His and Her 5 Post with my partner. And it was his idea to start the blog. I was like, listen, I don't have time. I'm responsible for 150 students, how am I going to have time to do a blog about money, which I was uncomfortable with to begin with. But we started it anyways, and I totally got into it. I loved it. I loved writing about our money journey. And through that blog, I got a couple of features with some major publications. Then I had a few people within the personal finance community reach out to me and say, hey, I like your work. I like your blog. Would you be willing to write for me? This is how much we'll pay you per article. And I was like, yeah, oh my God, cool. I can have a side hustle. I can make money online, which was total foreign concept to me at that point. So that's why I say freelance writing found me. It just fell into my lap and I went for it. And so that was my side hustle alongside teaching for quite a while. And I realized once I started making money online, that the options to make money online were kind of endless. So that was really exciting for me, especially as a teacher who's got to bring in that extra income. So once I had started freelancing for a while, I felt like I was building up a reputation in the community, which was really cool. And people knew that I was teaching design and English. I went to school, I have a BFA, and then I got my master's in teaching, but minored in English and arts as well. So I've always had a background in both of those things. My preference has always been the arts. From the very beginning, I wanted to get paid to create, specifically with design. So I had a few people from the community say, hey, I'm looking to have this done. And I was like, you know what? I'm an expert in this. I teach this all day long. Why not just put myself out there, see how it goes? And it went really well. And that kind of planted the seed for what would soon become a full-blown design business.
Interesting. Why were people talking to you about the design? Were you showcasing anything from your portfolio, or did you make it known that that's what you did?
Yeah, my first website is a little embarrassing, but I've shared it before. We all start somewhere. I just kind of listed on my site the things that I offered. I offered website design, I offered graphic design, and I offered writing services. Those were the three services I started in for my side hustle. Writing was the first, and then I made my website and added the graphic design and the web design. And I added them because I was teaching them and I knew how to do it. But I had never done it as a business. So I think I was maybe just a little unsure of myself at that point if I could offer those things as a business. My previous experience had been working for an agency and a gallery, doing work within a company. So the idea of me doing it alone was oh, is that even possible? But I just put them up on my website, and that's how people saw that it was an option if they worked with me.
Oh, that's awesome. So as far as the freelance writing work goes, did you ever pitch others, or did all clients come to you?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, that would be the dream, right? They just flow right in. No, my first two clients came to me. And then after that, I was opened up to that whole world. And so I started like pitching myself, or if I knew a friend who knew the editor at a company, I would just check in with them and see if they had any openings. And then within different online communities, if there was a posting, I would just respond with my resume or my website to put myself out there for that. I did all of that kind of in the evenings and weekends because I'm still working a full-time job at this point. But the moment I started making money online, it was like very exciting for me. And I think there's a little bit of a struggle for a lot of business owners in making the leap from freelancing into a business. And that was definitely challenging for me on multiple levels. Like, not only did I have to like build up enough income as a freelancer to feel comfortable leaving my job and transitioning to a business, which that in itself is a challenge. But then the second part is that I had to actually niche down, and starting a business or freelancing is just like messy. You're just kind of like trying things, figuring it out, seeing what works. And so the idea of niching down feels so limiting. You're like, I don't know. So I didn't do that at first, which was to my detriment for sure. But once I did niche down and make my transition into what I loved doing, the rest of my work and my clients just like came in. I don't want to say naturally. It's not like I'm sitting here doing nothing, but it came in and it felt more authentic to me.
Right. And you are so right with the messiness. I think I'm generalizing, but most of us, if not all, kind of throw spaghetti to the wall and see what sticks. I think we can kind of, when we're on a podcast interview or when we're writing an article, we can tie things up in a nice little neat bow, right? Like, I'm sure people are surprised to hear that I've been writing since 2012. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. So it's like a almost 10-year transition for me to what I'm doing now. So a lot of throwing spaghetti at the wall, really, so to speak, for the last little while.
Right. And I feel like there's this like headline, I don't know what to call it, but it's like the headline syndrome, where someone puts it out there that they're a freelancer making six figures and all they do is this one thing. And if you're new to freelancing or to the idea of owning your own online business, it sounds like so pretty and so perfect, and like you could just do it and that's your linear path. But linear paths in this kind of world do not exist. And so that said, it's also important that we let it be messy, because if I hadn't just like tried things and said, yeah, sure, I'll freelance write for you. Oh, sure, I'll try that. Like, I wouldn't have come to the conclusions I did about the types of clients I wanted to work with and the type of services I wanted to offer.
Right. And you wouldn't have been, this is just from what I hear, like open to that world of online business and what was possible to do with just a laptop or a computer and the internet, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at which point did you feel like, okay, I like this as a side hustle and obviously I'm liking the money that I'm making. Did you decide, okay, I'm actually going to niche down and leave my teaching job?
Yeah. So leaving my teaching job was terrifying. And I think a lot of people talk about like risk taking when it comes to your business. And I think that's a huge risk that you're taking. I came to that decision because my teaching position was really challenging. I worked in a Title I school. It was a pretty rough school. And the system there, I felt like I came across a lot of challenges, like actually teaching students. And I had this idea in my head when I went from grad school into teaching that everyone in my classroom would want to create, and we would just all be there like making and loving that time together. And any teachers listening right now are like probably cracking up, because that's just not the reality of it. You're not going to end up with a classroom full of people who are interested in that. So that was like hard for me. And then once I got over that, it was just kind of the environment that was pretty stressful. So I'll say that that was part of the push, but it definitely wasn't everything, right? There were a lot of pieces that went into me leaving. The second piece was income. So over the year that I was freelancing, I finally started making almost the same as my teacher paycheck, which on the side was amazing extra income for us to like reach some of our financial goals. But it was also that like proof, that actual proof that I could do this and just this and really make it. And I had the skills to do that as well. So that helped. And then lastly, I'll say that I am in a long-term partnership, and being in that partnership allowed me to kind of bridge the gap between where my freelance income was and where it needed to be for the following year after I quit. We happened to move at the same time too. So there was like a lot happening that year. Like my partner was losing his job, but getting a new one in a new state at the same time. So we knew that was coming up. And so it was like, if I did leave, it's like I could leave now or I could leave 1 year later, and I would still have to leave 1 year later because of our move. So all of those components came together and helped me make that decision. And then another piece of it too was I was counting on PSLF, public service loan forgiveness, to pay off my student loans because I was working as a teacher. And anyone who has student loans knows like that burden and that feeling of needing them to go away. So I had to sit down with my partner and calculate, okay, if I did leave and I start my own business, I would also have to make sure that my income increases enough to have us both pay off those student loans, because now we can't count on forgiveness anymore. So that there were quite a few like serious conversations that happened before I made that leap. And I just think that's like something that's maybe not talked about a lot, because I was seeing a lot of like, you can just quit your job and do this thing. And it was really a struggle for me because I was scared. I was nervous about making enough money and supporting my family. But at the same time, I was so excited because I loved what I was doing. So I was kind of battling with both of those things too.
Right. It just sounds like, it definitely depends on the numbers, but it's also your personality, because I've heard a range of stories where somebody quit without really a plan or emergency fund, and they, through their words, sheer stubbornness. Whereas some others might be like, oh, I need a year's worth of savings before I can even make the leap because I've all these responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the lesson there that I'm hearing is figuring out how comfortable do I need to feel or before I make the leap. And for you, it sounds like you had a lot of conversations with your partner and obviously looking at the numbers and then making a decision based on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'll never be an advocate for like quit your day job kind of thing. And I think that for me, it wasn't like that I wouldn't follow through on anything or that I couldn't build a client base, because I had already built that. It was like, can I make this happen consistently? And can we work with the numbers? And once those two questions were answered, we made that decision. It was like very exciting, but very terrifying at the same time.
Right. And so your goal at that time was just to ramp up your freelance writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was my freelancing in general. So I was doing design at that point and writing. And this is where like the niching down comes into play, because I was kind of offering everything, right? It was like offering writing and design and web design. And it was like also to any niche, anyone coming my direction, I was offering those services. And that got so messy because I felt stretched thin. I would have clients come in from totally different industries that I'd then have to familiarize myself with. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was just like a lot to process. And then through that, I was able to figure out who I wanted to work with and then what I wanted to offer, which ended up being no freelance writing officially, like anywhere, and then leaning into design, because that's what I'm the most passionate about. It's what all my previous education was in. It's what I had worked in agencies and other companies as. So I felt like leaning into that was really just natural for me. And then I had given up the writing, which was good because it allowed me to focus on what I loved. But that was another scary decision of like, okay, these are consistent clients. And then design is not that way. And that's something else to like consider when it comes to services, because a lot of times with writing, like I would have a client and I would just be forever on their team and I'd get 4 articles a month and it was a set payment and I could count on that, right? But in design, it's project based. So once we're done working on a project, they might come back a few months later for something else, but they're not going to be there every month. And so I had to figure out how I was going to structure my business that way that was still sustainable for our family.
Right. And we'll definitely get to that. But before that, I'm really curious about some of the maybe questions or reflection process that you used and probably still use now to figure out, okay, like this is my ideal client or this is not my ideal client, even why not freelance writing anymore?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first question was, what do I feel good about? And there were very few freelance writing clients that I felt like I was excited to get up that morning and write that 2,000-word article for. And I think that I went back to when I first made that decision to leave my 9 to 5 and enter this profession was for the freedom and to do something that I loved. And I had taken on so many clients and so many different types of work, a lot of writing work. And I realized like I was just taking on work because it was there, not because it was meaningful to me or something that I felt passionate about. And so that was like the first question. But at the same time, like, of course, you're always balancing the income piece of it. And then I also considered like, who are the people that are doing really cool things that are making the world a better place? And this was a little bit of a progression for me to get to, but I realized as a designer or a creative that I was making ideas a reality or making them present in some way in the online space. And so it felt like those ideas that I made into a reality should also make the world a better place for me personally. So that is what really helped me to find who I wanted to work with, which ended up being purpose-driven businesses who are giving back in some important way. And whether that be like speaking about topics that are not spoken about very often or actually giving back in a monetary way to the environment, like those were all things that I also felt good about and wanted to help them and their business in some way that would further that mission. Once I found that, I was like, oh, it's like so much more of a partnership really between me and the client or the company because I'm just as passionate about their mission or their purpose. And that made me even more excited to put together their branding or to write their article or whatever service that I was offering. So that was something that became essential for weeding out work that I didn't really want to do.
All right. So talk to me about how you went about pricing, because like you mentioned a couple minutes ago, where freelance writing is, yeah, you get steady work, you get, 4 articles a month, like you said, and then it just kind of continues, whereas design doesn't really happen. So how did you price it so that you were able to get a steady stream of income?
Right. Well, my first few design clients were embarrassingly low prices of like $200 for a logo. And I say it's embarrassingly low because the design industry in general has a huge range, right? Like you can find people on Fiverr for $20 for a logo, or you can work with agencies who charge $30,000 for a branding package. But there's a huge difference between a logo and like a branding package. And I had to face a few things. The first was imposter syndrome and realizing that what I brought to the table was valuable, because I think in creative industries, your work can be really undervalued. This is definitely my opinion, but I think a lot of people view it as something fun, something easy. Oh, you just get to play around on the computer all day. But the reality is, for most creatives, what you make will improve or increase the business's profits in some way. And that's of huge value to any business who's looking to grow, obviously. So I think I had to come to that realization that pricing myself was going to have to better my industry, even if that meant that I was going to have to talk about why it's valuable to people who didn't know. I still felt like that was really important. Thinking about like how that work can impact their business in the long term. And I like to use the analogy of like photographers. Not that that's something I do, but like if someone takes a picture of a realtor and then that realtor puts it on like a bus stop all over town, it's probably going to be on that bus stop for the next 2 or 3 years and making that person quite a bit of money. But, you know, like if that photographer only charged a couple $100s for those photos, that's really like underserving their industry and what they really did for that person overall. So I think that's just like a good example and one that I heard along the way that helped me like frame my pricing for the different services that I offered when it came to branding and design.
Right. And you had said you had niched down too. So do you have any specific packages that you do for your design business now? And how did you come up with those?
Yeah, so I have 3 different packages for my design business, and they're branding packages. So I offer a custom mini brand, a complete branding package, and then my Make It Work branding package, which is branding plus website design. And what I offer beyond just a logo, which is what I always say, it's important that whoever you work with as a designer offers more than just a logo. And I say this now, having been the person who definitely just offered logos at one point while I was still figuring this out. But I offer brand strategy and, of course, the brand identity process, which is all of those visuals that are attached to it. And the brand strategy really frames your niche, your audience, your target, your brand voice, your brand personality. And all of that is really important for showing up consistently, because when you show up consistently, you're going to build that trust, which converts your clients or customers. And so that's my main goal when I'm offering design services, is that it's beyond just the visuals. Yes, like you can find a pretty logo on Canva, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to serve your audience or serve your business. And so that's why what I do is custom work, and that makes sure that your business is like heading in the right direction.
So talk to me about completely transitioning away from freelance writing and all of the other services you offered and just doing design.
I would say it's pretty recent that I really finally cut the cord with pretty much all of my writing clients. And I went slowly because there's always a few clients that are just like so good to you that even if I'm not like passionate about maybe the topic, they're so good to you and it's hard to like say goodbye to them. So I took a little longer with some. And I just waited until I had set up a system where I was generating leads of some kind, because when you have a business where it's project-based, you have to have lead generation of some kind. And that took me a while to figure out what the heck that would look like. So that's what I was doing before I was like totally cutting out the writing work. And then I cut out like I was doing some other stuff like community management and running the back ends of some sites. And I just decided to leave all of that because that was like distracting from the work that I was doing with other people. But the crazy thing is, it like never gets easier to leave. Like I don't know if you felt this, like, but anytime I write like sorry, I can't continue, or resignation, or whatever you want to call it, it's like never easier. Even if the client wasn't great, it just feels like, oh, okay, if I let this go, it means that I have to trust that something else is going to come my way, as is the world of online business. But that's still like the risk, because you have to trust in yourself and that thing is going to come your way. So that's always such a mental like hurdle that I struggle with every time. That is definitely true for me.
Yeah, you're not alone. Trust me. You are not alone in that. You're right. It doesn't get easier. It's almost this scarcity mindset of sorts where you're like, oh, if I give this up, well, okay, speaking for myself, where I'm like, oh my gosh, nothing's going to come my way. I'm going to be homeless and have to, anyway, that's like the worst case scenario, kind of, you're spiraling. Of course, it doesn't turn out the way that I envision it, but I can't help but think about that every time that I'm switching something. So totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I was just going to add to that like when you leave a client, as we can call ourselves freelancers, or I call myself a business owner. That's what I've transitioned to. I'm still a solopreneur. I still am the only person running my business and offering my services. And so when I have to make that decision to leave a client or move in a different direction, it feels so personal too, because I'm not part of like a huge team and I'm serving them individually. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, but I want them to still like me and I want to still foster that connection. So I've tried to find ways to make sure that that still stays in place as long as like we have a good working relationship. But it feels like strangely so personal as I sit here in my home, like doing this work for that person as an individual, you know?
Yeah, it's very true. So what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you are still maybe keeping in touch with them or keeping that business relationship open?
The first thing I do is I usually will always give a heads up that this is happening before I do anything official. And then if it's a position where I know someone who can fill that role, I'll look for that person and try and get them in the door and train them, or at least give the client some options and send them the direction of a few other people that I know are going to do well in that position. And that one like makes sure that I'm not leaving this person high and dry, no matter what service it was. And it's like paying it forward to anyone else out there I know in my community who is looking for work and I know does good work. So in that way, those two things are really good. And then whenever I leave a client that I'm doing design work with and we're like done with a project, I may see them again or I may not, but I always leave them with a success guide now. And that kind of goes over like exactly how to use what I made for them, but also how we can like stay connected in the future, which includes a referral program. So that's another way that I've kept those connections. And that's specific to like project-based work. And then I always make sure that we stay connected on LinkedIn and I check in with them and support them by sharing and liking whatever they're doing, even after I've left. As long as everything still aligns, like it certainly isn't always that way. I mean, there have been bad apples, but in general, that's what I do.
Right. So now that you've fully transitioned to your design business, A, how are you feeling about it? And then B, where do you see yourself perhaps pivoting within that in the future?
I'm feeling really good about it, like so good about it. I am so excited about all of the things that I'm doing. And I'm at a point where my first level of success was all about the hustle, like take on as much as you can, try it all, figure it out. This next level of success is kind of about the exact opposite, which I think is really important. Someone told me once that usually what gets you to the next level of success isn't what you did to start out with. And that happens to be really true for me. So that feels really good that I can just focus in on exactly what I know I'm good at and what I'm building. And so I plan to stay in that for as long as time will allow and my systems will allow. I have been crafting some courses. So I definitely hope to like branch out more into passive income as a second portion of my business, because it's pretty much all service-based right now. I have a small amount of passive income from an Etsy shop, but that's about it. So I'm building courses and I want to open a mentorship up because I feel like it took me, 3 years to figure out business online, and I want to help other people do that. So that's what I'm looking at into the future. But right now, I am really happy with where I'm at, although I'm sure pivots are out there.
Right. Of course. It sounds like a natural evolution of anybody's business. Well, Bethany, where can everyone find you and your awesome design business?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Bethany Works Design, and then you can find me at BethanyWorks.com.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's take a look at some lessons we can learn from my conversation with Bethany. Lesson number 1, It's okay not to have an initial plan when you're looking to take your venture full time. So in Bethany's case, she did a little bit of everything like freelance writing, designing, VA work, and that's okay. If your goal is to try to earn more than your day job or whatever it is in order to be able to become self-employed or a business owner, that's okay. You have all the time you can in the world to figure out what it is as you go along, as you saw with or heard from Bethany's story. Lesson number 2 is transitions in business is messy, and that's okay. So if you take a look at a lot of social media posts like Instagram or Facebook or even sometimes Twitter, it may seem like your business heroes have this seamless transition from one thing to another or introducing new products and services, and it just seems like everything is so easy for them. But the truth is, in the background, there's a lot of messy work that takes place. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of trial and error, right? Throwing spaghetti at the wall, all of those things you may not know behind the scenes. And so if you're transitioning from one business model to another or different products and services to another, and it's a little sticky, a little messy, and you feel like you don't really know what you're doing, it's all part of the process. Lesson number 3 is to take time to reflect on what your skills are and what you're passionate about doing. It's all about balancing both of those. You want to be able to do something that you're really good at and people are willing to pay you for. That's where your skill comes in. And also what you're like doing or you're really passionate about, because you want to be able to enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to burn out and you're going to give up really quickly. So think about what you can do to balance both. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Plutus Awards Podcast. If you're interested in collaborating with other financial bloggers, podcasters, influencers, and more to chat about your work, interests, ask and answer questions, come join our Facebook community. Search for Plutus Community in the search bar or head to facebook.com/groups/Plutus Community. We hope to see you there and get a chance to support you and your amazing work.